Okay, my next guest, a regular on the show. You know him as my favorite ATF buster. Good friend of mine, good friend of yours, and a good friend of America's for the work that he's doing. David Codria, welcome back to the show. David, how are you?
Mark, I'm doing good tonight. Thanks for having me back on.
Oh, you are more than welcome. Let's start with this, because I was having this conversation with my dad today. U.S. Attorney says Terry family not legally victims. Now, I have my theory. I'll bounce it off of you and then let you explain it. If they give victim status to Officer Terry's family, they're admitting complacency, aren't they?
Well, the way I see it is he is weasel wording. This is U.S. Attorney Dennis Burke in the Arizona District, and what happened was that the Terry family asked to be included in the trial against one of the gun walkers, okay? And I think that the legal term they use is interveners. And Dennis K. Burke, who's the United States Attorney for the District of Arizona, he entered a response last week in the district court to deny the motion. And essentially what he's saying is, well, we're going after this guy for gun running. And even though the gun was found at the scene of the Terry murder, it hasn't been proven that that gun was actually used in the murder. So this is a separate crime, and therefore they don't get to qualify under precedent as legal interveners and as victims according to, I think it was called the Crime Victim Rights Act.
Okay, now we're playing semantics and we're splitting hairs. I said complacent. I said complacency. I meant being complicit.
Yes, but and here's what's going on, because Burke was part and parcel of authorizing and overseeing the entire gun runner. This man has a conflict of interest. He needs to be removed. This is a guy who, forget just complicity. Okay, we know that there was complicity, but now what we have is conflict of interest, and the whole business was ATF was saying, well, it wasn't proven that, or they said definitively that gun was not used to kill Brian Terry, and the FBI came back and said, hold the phone, guys. We had some fragments. We can't do conclusive tests to make a claim like that. And it's something that Mike Vanderbilt calls the banality of evil. And I got to tell you, Mark, this one here had jaws dropping. But one other thing, and I'm really happy to say this, and it sounds like, I'm going to break my arm patting myself on the back and all this.
I'll do it for you.
Okay, but here's the thing, Mark. I got this 2 days before any news outlet posted on this. I had it a full 2 days before Fox, and then everybody jumped on the bandwagon after that. And I was the only one who had the actual document, which I filed on my Scribed account. So it's the kind of the frustrating thing that Mike and I have been going through since day one, since late December, when he first broke the news from Cleanup ATF, and soon after where he and I joined forces on this story, that we are always coming up with this kind of stuff that later on big boy media gets involved in. And so I'm real grateful for shows like yours where we can set the record straight, because I'm not looking to try to, I've said before, this story isn't about me, this story isn't about Mike. By the same token, we can't forget that the establishment media has dropped the ball on this, and that it was, in fact, new media that brought this story to the fore, and had that not happened, we wouldn't be talking about any of this.
No, and they're not going to give you. They're not. Let's put it this way: the mainstream media is not going to pat you on the back for doing jobs that they should be doing. And listen, talk about complicity. We could have a field day with that conversation, David,
yeah.
with the mainstream media. But they're part of the reason that this country is in the mess that it's in today, on a lot of different fronts. Speaking of Mike Vanderbilt, Sean, did we lose Mike, or did we lose David?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure we'll get him back in just a second. I'll go back to my original point on that. That if you look at the statement that U.S. Attorney says Terry family not legally victims, what is that saying? If they give him victim status, they're complicit in his murder. I can't. That's about the only way. Look, you can take 2 and 2 and make 4 out of it all day long. But they're certainly not. It's not shocking to me that they would do something like that by any stretch. And some of the other things when we get David back on the phone that we want to talk with him about, he was mentioning Mike Vanderboe. Mike Vanderboe was recently featured in a WorldNet Daily story on the U.S. Attorney and calling for his removal. You know, Mike's been on the program before, and I need to get him back on because he and Dave working behind the scenes and feeding this stuff to the mainstream media. I would really like to see both of them get their due here. And they will. They are. They're getting it on programs like this and a number of other outlets across the country, including David's show in Phoenix. But we also have Washington Post claiming that the criticism of their Gunwalker coverage is unfair. We'll talk with David about that when we get him back. Looks like we're going to have to wait till after the break. The Washington Post. The Washington Post-it note, which is about what their journalism is worth anymore, says the criticism of their Project Gunwalker coverage is unfair. What coverage? What coverage? It's just boggles the mind. They don't cover it, then they claim when they do write something about it because they're behind the 8 ball that the response by us to their coverage is unfair. Doesn't make any sense. We'll come back again with David Kodria. We'll start talking about some of that stuff with Mike Vanderboe, the U.S. Attorney, papers claiming Obama administration is going to cooperate, and everything else with this mess caused by the ATF. We'll be back.
We don't need to convince you that the threat of forced entry is on the rise and that your door locks are inadequate. Now you can virtually eliminate the threat of your door being kicked in with the Door Sentinel. The Door Sentinel offers standalone door kick-in protection for under $67. The Door Sentinel installs on any door in minutes. Turn your home or apartment into a fortress today. To take advantage of this special Armed American Radio offer and to purchase the Door Sentinel, visit armedamericanradio.com. Secure your home today.
We've got David Kodria back, my favorite ATF buster. David, sorry about that. I guess you guys got some weather up there?
Yeah, we've had storms. We were actually out of power for a couple hours today, and we apparently just had a little hiccup with the phone system, but it appears back now, so let's keep our fingers crossed and hope we can finish out the segment here.
You want to get conspiratorial there?
Sure.
You sure that wasn't...
Okay. I don't think, unless they're controlling the weather, although I understand some conspiracy theorists think that they're doing that too.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. We've got some big ray gun that can make it snow.
First of all, what's the situation like there right now in Guizhou? Is the drought getting worse or getting better?
Well, to tackle the increasingly severe drought, the local meteorological department has created artificial rainfall, taking advantage of the weather conditions during the last few days, and the drought in some areas has been partly eased. Dongning.
Right, and we also acknowledge that different measures are being taken to relieve the drought, such as producing artificial rainfall.
Okay, we left off. I kind of gave up some of the bullet points to listeners as we went into the break while we were waiting to get you back on the air, and that was speak a little bit about Mike Vanderboe. He was featured in a WorldNet Daily story on the U.S. Attorney, and he made some great calls for his removal. Mike is really good. I'd like to have him back on, both of you on it sometime in the near future together. Tell us about what's going on with that.
Well, the WorldNet Daily, basically what he was doing in that particular story, he was focusing on the FBI, talk about the word complicity that you used earlier, and saying that this is the great unexplored story of Gunwalker, that because, we've seen how FBI gunrunners were actually being shadowed by ATF, and they did not know that these people were paid informants and essentially paid employees of the United States government working for the FBI. And so Mike is basically advancing that this is another major door that needs to be opened and walked through by the media. And again, Mark, this is the biggest thing that makes me sit there and scratch my head, except that, you want to talk about conspiracies, and I'm not sure if it's a conspiracy of ignorance, if it's a conspiracy of commission or omission, or what the heck is going on. But, once the big media organizations came into this, and I think I've told you this offline, that I was really thinking that my and Mike's part was going to be minimal because
right.
we'd done the initial stuff, but now that the people with the resources and the ability to fly people in and get access and all that had taken over, I was thinking we weren't going to be, having any more to do, and yet here We're breaking stories about this U.S. attorney with the filing. We're still on top of this and beating the media, and I just got to scratch my head. And then I see the Washington Post comes out, the WAPO, and these people have just been derelict and
dead. They've been dead.
Yeah.
And you missed this as we were waiting to get you back on, where I mentioned as we closed out the last segment, David, that the Washington Post now says criticism of her Gunwalker coverage is unfair. And I know that's where you're going.
Yeah.
What coverage? And when guys like us question what little coverage they do provide, you've got to be kidding me. So I'll let you take off on this as the guy who supplies the media with this stuff.
And Mike Vanderbo again, and ladies and gentlemen, SipsyStreetIrregulars.blogspot.com. If you are not making that a regular visit in your internet browsing, the only person you're really cheating is yourself, because you're going to see breaking stuff, and you're going to see just, Mark, you know what the stuff is.
Hard-hitting breaking stuff, let me put it that way.
Absolutely, no compromise, hard-hitting breaking stuff. And so Mike basically just dissected it and the way that he proved everything. And, of course, I have a timeline. I have a 5-volume journalist guide, for goodness sakes, that shows everything Mike and I have written since late December of last year on this, okay? And Mike let the guy know, you know what, since early February, we have been including the Washington Post reporters on every release that happens on Sipsy Street Irregulars. So don't say that you didn't know about it. He even routinely ridicules them, calls them Pravda on the Potomac. Mm-hmm. And he has this picture of Lenin reading a newspaper, and he always captions it that this is, Assistant Attorney General Lanny Brewer, who's, really thrilled that Pravda on the Potomac is taking his talking points and spreading them out around, across the land. And it just, for the crust of these people to come out and say it's unfair to criticize us for our coverage and we've had good coverage and all that. They've had non-existent coverage, and on top of that, when they do, they are cheerleaders for using this to give ATF even more power and to take even more rights away from you and me.
Let me tell you what the Washington Post might want to start taking into consideration. And by the way, I'm going to come down on a conspiracy of omission in regards to that lack of coverage. But this is where the Washington Post and some of those reporters, and they're listening to us right inside the Beltway right now and outside the Beltway, Maryland and Washington and Virginia. The ATF has no authority to track the purchases of law-abiding gun owners, and the Second Amendment Task Force applauds the lawsuit to stop this effort. That's Georgia Republican Representative Paul Braun, who told the Daily Caller that, and I quote, to anybody who's not familiar with the Second Amendment Task Force, it's a group, a 13-member bipartisan group of lawmakers that was established back in 2009. Braun is the task force's co-chair. Stopping ATF's continued pattern of infringing on that right will certainly remain a high priority of our group, said Braun. So this is a story that isn't going to die. This is a different take on this. Is a different angle of the ATF story, David, when we're talking here about their illegal requirement by skirting Congress's authority to require multiple purchases, as we've discussed on this program many times before and will continue to discuss until it's dead in the water. This is a different, I don't know, I guess where I'm going with this is that the Washington Post better start waking up. And they better start paying attention, because this isn't going away. As much as they want it to go away, it isn't going to go away, and it is going to lead right to their man. The most interesting guy in the world.
Well, it's funny because to again show you the dereliction on the part of our mainstream media, again, this is something that Mike posted, and this is why, I unabashedly promote his work every chance I get, because I owe him a lot personally, and that the Mexican press, the Mexican print press, had a round table with Obama, and they asked him, should Eric Holder resign over this? And Obama flatly, and it was an uncomfortable moment, just said no, a one-word answer. But the question becomes, why is no one in the American press asking him this? Why does it take the Mexican press to get this most basic of questions out there on the table?
Well, I can answer that, if I may be so bold.